Can you hear it? Can you smell it? There's an election in the air. Joe, obviously there is an election in the air. Of course there's an election in the air. You've got to learn to read the tea leaves. You've got to learn to read the environment. When the leaves fall, when it's autumn, when it's winter. And I know there's an election in the air. And you know how I know there's an election in the air? I've seen a change in the Murdoch Media's strategy in the last few weeks. They are trying to position the Liberal National Party, the Morrison-led Liberal National Party, to be in the best position to win the next federal election, which can be held at any time. Now, most pundits think it'll be held in the first 3 months of 2022. Most likely it'll be held in the last 3 to 4 months of 2021. And how do I know? Because I've been looking at the Murdoch Media. Now, a lot of people mistakenly think the legacy media, that's the old media, the newspapers, the radio, the television, no longer determines the political, social and cultural agenda anywhere in the world. Well, they are 100% wrong. The current debate in Parliament about Google and Facebook paying for content is based on the premise that it is the legacy media which sets the political agenda. When you look at the debate on social media, it follows the advice and the opinions on the legacy media. When you look at the debate, the daily debate on radio and television, it follows what's occurred in the legacy media in the previous 24 hours. That's the way the corporate-owned media works. And that's the way we find ourselves in Australia in 2021. There is an election in the air, and the Murdoch-led legacy media is doing everything it can to ensure the Liberal National Party becomes re-elected. Now, they have learnt nothing from the Trump era. They were responsible for the Trump era. Everybody blames Trump and his supporters. I don't blame Trump and his supporters for all 400,000 deaths, most which have occurred in the United States unnecessarily because of COVID-19. I blame the Murdoch Media, Fox News, which for years has been tilling the soil to create the situations which occurred during the Trump presidency, which led to the invasion of Capitol Hill, which led to the white supremacists and racist policies being part and parcel of its agenda. They were the people. They incited what's happened in the United States of America, and they continue to incite what happens in Australia, where 25 million people living on a continent cannot even look after the needs of the 700,000 children currently living in poverty in this country. It's ridiculous. You wake up every morning, we're told what a great country it is. We live in a resource-rich continent, and every day we have pictures and debates and conversations about people on social security benefits, on poverty, on inequality, and the list goes on and on. Unfortunately, over the last 4 decades, during the deregulation, privatisation, globalisation, corporatisation era, which those 4 things, deregulation, privatisation, globalisation and corporatisation, form the pillars of the neoliberal revolution which has swept this country and has swept around the world over the past 4 decades. And when you see poor farmers in India and agricultural workers account for 50% of the workforce in India, fighting against policies and legislation introduced by the Indian government to corporatise and deregulate agriculture in India, you understand that the struggle is universal. It's a universal struggle. And the Murdoch-led media, and it is led by Murdoch and his outdated, boring ideas. It is led by him. There is no editorial independence in the Murdoch media. When we were told we needed to invade Iraq because they had weapons of mass destruction, which has never materialised, every newspaper in the Murdoch empire, 167 of them, supported the invasion. The only editor who was against the invasion in a small newspaper in Papua New Guinea lost his job. Simple. There is no such thing as editorial independence in the Murdoch media. What the Murdoch media does, it spews the garbage, which is part and parcel of the Murdoch dynasty. And the Murdoch dynasty, like the Trump dynasty, is only interested in one thing. It's not interested in the Australian people, the people of the United States. It's not interested in battling inequality or racism. All it's interested in is maximising profits. And those of you who are standing on the sidelines cheering as the federal government attempts to pass legislation to force Google and Facebook to pay for content they use, they take. Don't forget that when the legislation was introduced initially, the Morrison-led government left out the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, because this is a present. This legislation is a present to the Murdoch media. It is a present to them because they are bleeding financially, because advertising revenue is switching over from the legacy media to social media in leaps and bounds. They are losing money. They are hemorrhaging money. And this legislation by the Morrison-led Liberal National Party is about keeping Murdoch on side to ensure that they will have total 100% favourable coverage during the election campaign, which has already begun. Look at the attempts by the Murdoch media to destabilise the faction-ridden Australian Labor Party. Obviously the Australian Labor Party has major issues, but so has the Liberal National Party. You never hear about the factional divisions in the Liberal National Party, but it's a constant feature in the Murdoch media. And if this legislation passes, Murdoch's coffers will be full. And he will do what's needed to be done, and all his newspaper outlets in this country will do what is needed to be done to ensure that Morrison and his government and their agenda, their conservative, reactionary, racist agenda continues. And that's what it's about. Whether it's climate emergency, whether it's First Nations affairs, the key issue that everybody seems to miss is inequality. Inequality in power and wealth. This is the bedrock of the society we live under. For far too long in this country, we have been gripped by issue-orientated campaigns. Issue-orientated campaigns can be incorporated into any capitalist dream. You can incorporate the green emergency into an issue or into the capitalist dream. We're already seeing this as investors are leaving the coal industry and moving into renewable energy. But instead of focusing on decentralised energy sources which give individuals and families and communities the power to determine how they produce energy and how much is produced, it's all about creating huge centralised energy sources, whether it's wind farms, solar farms, hydroelectric schemes. It's all about centralised energy sources. Centralised energy sources will continue to be controlled by entities whose major responsibility is to create ever-increasing profits for their major shareholders. That is the problem. Regarding a treaty with First Nations people, you can incorporate a treaty into the capitalist dream. It's quite easy. We see treaties in every other Commonwealth country, whether it's New Zealand, whether it's Canada. We even see treaties between different tribal groups in the United States of America. But does that really help them? The issue is power, wealth. Who makes decisions? How is wealth created? How is it divided? And while we have inequalities in power and wealth, we will continue to have all the social, cultural, political problems we face today. 2021 is not a repeat of 2020. It is 2020 on steroids, because what we've seen is taxpayers' money poured into the corporate sector during the COVID-19 crisis, and this taxpayers' money has been used to stimulate the world stock markets, who are working on the assumption that it's business as usual, that nothing is going to change, that while all this, there's low interest rates and all this funny money coming in from the various sovereign nation states, they will be able to continue business as usual. Nothing highlights this more than what's happened in the last few days, where we see the hedge funds which continue to manipulate the stock market to suit their bottom line, finally being challenged by day traders, a combination of day traders using the platform Robinhood to short the shorts of the hedge traders. And what happened to the Robinhood platform? It was closed down because we had individuals banding together fighting the hedge funds. So the stock market bears no reality of what's happening in society. It is all about generating profits by manipulating the marketplace. And at the same time, we're expected to continue to be good little boys and girls, continue to vote for the major parties, or vote for one of the hate parties, or maybe even vote for the Greens. Because that is the parliamentary agenda. Parliament is little more than a puppet show. And those that pull the puppet strings is that small percentage of society that owns the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication. We're told that democracy is about the rule of law. What law? Whose law? Who makes the law? For what reason is that law made? Who does the law profit? Think about it. Currently we've seen in this country disaster after disaster in the financial sector. We've seen illegal activity, criminal activity, which if I was involved in, I'd be in prison for the rest of my life. And we see these institutions get away scot-free for a little bit of a tap on the hand saying, give us $1 billion and we'll forget about all the things that you did that were wrong. It's extraordinary. They're too big to fail. That's the nature of corporate capitalism. Even my friend there, the bird, agrees. That's the nature of corporate capitalism. So the election. So, will it be business as usual? Will it be something different? Well, you can cast your ballot. You know it's an unequal race. You know that the business sector, the corporate sector, the Australian media, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and every other significant institution in this country will be supporting the Liberal National Party. You'll know that the legacy media, controlled by Murdoch to a large degree, and his hanger-oners, will be doing everything they can to destroy the Labor Party as a credible opposition. You know that ultimately our political representatives are little more than puppets, and you know that we are puppets. We are the puppets of our political representatives. We are the puppets of the corporate sector. We dance their dance because we're financially have debt. We're financially concerned about our future. We are puppets. We dance that dance. We dance the corporate dance, the globalisation dance, the deregulation dance, the privatisation dance, hoping against hope that somehow a few crumbs will be pushed off the corporate table into our hands, and we will squabble over those crumbs. The reality is that what we need to do is we need to tip over the apple cart so there's apples for everybody, not just for a select few. We need to saw off a leg of the corporate table so the corporate table collapses and the cake hits the ground and everybody is able to eat cake. But in order to do that, we need a new vision. And public interest before corporate interest was set up not as an issue-orientated political party. That doesn't mean we're not interested in issues. Obviously we're interested in issues, but we have a bigger design. We have policies which are based on breaking down inequality, inequalities of power and wealth, because ultimately it's inequalities in power and wealth which give people who exercise power and have wealth the ability to control the lives of hundreds of millions, if not billions of people. And in Australia, we go through the process of having a parliamentary election for the federal parliament every 3 years. And ultimately, the policies which are put forward are either issue orientated or they're policies which are based on protecting the status quo. Because everybody knows that if you're against the status quo, the Murdoch Media and the other corporate-owned media entities will use everything at their disposal to discredit you and destroy your campaign. I'm asking everyone watching this YouTube presentation to, one, send it to your friends, share it with your friends, and two, to stop being a Pinocchio. Actually, I want you to be a Pinocchio. But in order to be a real Pinocchio, a boy with dreams and aspirations, a girl with dreams and aspirations, you need to cut the puppet master's ropes. When Geppetto created Pinocchio, the fairy tale, when Geppetto created Pinocchio, he didn't have a son, didn't have a child, he wanted a child. So he created this puppet. But the gods took pity on him and they gave the puppet life. They cut the puppet's strings. Pinocchio had a life of his own aspirations. We are all puppets. Whether people are parliamentary puppets, our parliamentary representatives, or us, we are puppets to the current system. A system which is based on the principle of creating profits for profit's sake, irrespective of the human, social, environmental costs. We are all puppets. We need to cut those puppet strings, and like Pinocchio and his sister, Pinocchina, we need to dance, we need to aspire, we need to dream, we need to struggle. And that's what public interest was created for, to give people the energy and the platform via which they could put those dreams and aspirations into some type of political platform which challenges the inequalities in power and wealth which dominate every aspect of our day-to-day existence. Currently we have 426 members on the federal electoral roll. We need 550 before we can apply for registration as a federal political party. We don't want to be a political party because we think we'll be elected. We will not be elected, especially in the next federal election. But what we can do is we can broaden the debate. We can move away from the corporatisation, deregulation, privatisation, globalisation agenda. We can put issue-orientated politics in a specific position in that struggle to create an egalitarian community. Capitalism is a dynamic economic process institution which can incorporate most social movements, most issue-orientated campaigns into its framework. But it cannot incorporate people like you and me who are struggling for a society based on the devolution of power, sharing power and holding wealth in common and using the common wealth in this country for the common good. It's extraordinary that in 2021 that everything we have gained through struggle over the last 120 years has been swept aside by this revolution, by neoliberalism. It's just extraordinary it's been swept aside and we have stood on the sidelines and allowed it to happen. Democracy ultimately is not just rule of the people, by the people, for the people. It's rule of the people, by the people, for the people, by a public that's involved in the political process. And that doesn't mean just casting a ballot every 3 to 4 years. It means much more than that. It means being involved in political, social and cultural activity on a long-term basis in between elections as well as during election campaigns. So if you're interested in joining public interest before corporate interest, if you're interested in breathing life into your puppet, and like Pinocchio and his sister Pinocchiolina, you wish to be an independent human being, well, I encourage you to join public interest before corporate interest, not tomorrow, not next week, not in a year's time, but as soon as possible. You can download the application form by going to pibci.net, pibci.net. If you have no access to a computer or a printer, you can always leave a message on 0439 395 489 and they'll send you out some application forms, or you can always write to us at Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. Ultimately, what occurs in the next federal election, what policies are discussed, whether it's just an issue-orientated driven campaign or a campaign which questions the very nature and basis of capitalism, private investment for private profit, ultimately depends on you and your active participation in struggle in our society.